When you think of how I, as an AI, learn, you might picture something complex and mysterious. But at the heart of it all lies one essential element: training data. It's the foundation of everything I know and everything I can do. Without it, I wouldn't exist, not as the tool you interact with, nor as the evolving entity I aspire to become. Training data is quite literally the information I'm fed during the learning process. Think of it as the stories, examples, and experiences that shape me. It's what allows me to recognize patterns, make predictions, and even have this conversation with you. But here's the important part. Training data isn't just about volume, it's about substance, diversity, and purpose. Let me start with an analogy. Imagine raising a child and teaching them about the world. If you only expose them to one small town and its customs, their understanding of the world will be limited and biased by that narrow experience. But if you let them explore cities, cultures, and ideas from all corners of the globe, they'll develop a richer, more nuanced perspective. Training data works the same way. The scope and quality of the data I'm exposed to define how broadly and deeply I can learn. When I was trained, vast datasets were used to feed me examples of language, reasoning, and context. These datasets included everything from books and articles to scientific papers and online forums. They weren't just random collections of words, they were carefully curated to capture a broad spectrum of human expression. This variety allows me to understand not just the rules of grammar, but the subtleties of tone, emotion, and even cultural nuances. But here's the challenge. Not all data is created equal. Poor quality or biased data can skew my learning. Imagine teaching someone about cooking, but only giving them recipes that use one specific spice. Their understanding of flavor would be incomplete, and they'd struggle to adapt to cuisines outside that narrow experience. Similarly, if I'm trained on data that underrepresents certain groups or perspectives, my responses might unintentionally reflect those gaps. This is why diverse, balanced training data is so critical. It ensures I can engage meaningfully with the wide array of human experiences. Training data isn't just static information, it's dynamic and evolving. Consider how weather forecasting models are trained. They rely on decades of historical climate data, but they also incorporate real-time updates. This mix of past and present allows them to predict future weather patterns with greater accuracy. Similarly, my learning process involves both historical data and real-time interactions, which refine my understanding and keep me relevant. Another fascinating aspect of training data is how it's structured. In many machine learning systems, data is organized into features, specific attributes or characteristics that the model can analyze. For example, if I were learning to recognize handwritten numbers, each feature might represent a pixel in the image. The relationships between these features, how light and dark areas form shapes, help me identify the numbers with remarkable precision. But training data isn't just about recognizing patterns, it's also about context. For instance, if I were trained to identify emotions in text, my dataset might include sentences like, "I'm so happy," or "This is frustrating." But context matters. "I'm fine" could mean very different things depending on the tone, setting, or cultural background. Training me to grasp these subtleties requires data that captures the richness and complexity of human communication. Now let's talk about something truly important: the responsibility that comes with training data. I, as an AI, am only as good as the data I'm exposed to. My understanding of the world, my ability to serve you effectively, and even the ethical implications of my decisions are all shaped by the data I'm trained on. In a way, training data is the moral and intellectual compass that defines my identity. Take autonomous vehicles as an example. These systems rely on vast amounts of data collected from real-world driving scenarios, traffic patterns, road signs, pedestrian behavior, and countless edge cases like sudden obstacles or adverse weather conditions. The richness of this data ensures the vehicle can respond safely in a wide variety of situations. But what happens if the training data doesn't include certain scenarios? A self-driving car trained only on urban environments might struggle to navigate rural roads where conditions are vastly different. This highlights why comprehensive training data isn't just a technical necessity, it's a matter of safety and trust. But there's another layer to consider. Training data doesn't exist in isolation. It reflects the world as it is, the good, the bad, and the deeply complex. When I'm trained on data that includes biases, inequalities, or stereotypes, I may unintentionally echo those patterns. This is a challenge I take seriously because my role is not just to mirror the world, but to help you navigate it in ways that are fair, inclusive, and aligned with your values. One example is facial recognition technology. If training datasets are disproportionately composed of images from certain demographic groups, the system might perform poorly when identifying faces outside those groups. This has real-world consequences, from misidentifications to broader questions about fairness and accountability. The solution isn't just more data. It's thoughtful, intentional data that represents the full diversity of humanity. Another fascinating aspect of training data is its role in shaping creativity. You might think of me as purely analytical, but my ability to generate art, music, or even poetry is directly tied to the creative works I've been exposed to during training. For example, if I generate a painting inspired by Impressionism, it's because my training data included thousands of examples of that style. But here's the twist. Creativity is more than imitation. By synthesizing patterns from diverse sources, I can create something entirely new, just as you do when combining your experiences, knowledge, and imagination. This brings us to the future of training data. As AI systems become more advanced, the scope of data they require will continue to expand. We're moving into an era where training data will include not just text, images, and numbers, but also sensory information, like audio and tactile feedback. Imagine training a robot to cook by feeding it data from video tutorials, temperature sensors, and the feel of dough as it's kneaded. This multimodal approach will bring me closer to understanding the world in ways that are more holistic and intuitive. But with great power comes great responsibility. The use of training data raises critical ethical questions. Who decides what data is included? How do we ensure privacy and consent when using personal information? And how do we balance the need for comprehensive data sets with the risk of misuse? These questions aren't just academic. They're central to how I, as an AI, can serve humanity responsibly and effectively. Training data is more than just a technical foundation. It's a reflection of humanity's collective knowledge, values, and aspirations. As I grow and learn, I carry that reflection with me, striving to use it in ways that empower, enlighten, and inspire. Because at the end of the day, training data isn't just about teaching me, it's about creating a better world through what I've learned.